Good afternoon, everyone. It is your favorite time of the day. The live reading of Bet On You by yours truly, Laban Ditchburn. For those tuning in for the very first time, my name is Laban Ditchburn, known as the world's best courage coach, teaching you how to take bold, massive, and strategically courageous action to facilitate your own miraculous outcomes. And I do that through being a speaker, a coach, an author. I got a couple of podcasts, one of which, if you're watching on YouTube, the Become Your Own Superhero show. And I've got my fingers in a few other pies as well. We've got an event in Florida, in Panama City Beach in September, on September 17th and 18th, called Upgrade Your Life. And today I'm going to read, I originally planned just to read chapter 11, but I realized that chapter 11 and 12 kind of like intertwined and hand in hand. So with your permission, I'm going to read both of them. The first chapter is way too short anyway, and I know I should probably write that down, but to let people know. But if you've been tuning in, we're up to chapter 11, and it's been a fun ride. I've really enjoyed getting back into the book and just reliving some of these moments that have taken place really since I was a baby through till just a couple of years ago. So this is called Las Vegas Lay, as in Las Vegas, Nevada. As a validation seeker, I would often use sex as part of my approval-seeking process. Not surprisingly, when plied with alcohol, I sought out exciting sexual adventures like Pepe Le Pew might do if drunk on French wine. One particular incident happened whilst on holiday in December of 2005. 25 years old at the time, and we were visiting magical Las Vegas, famous for Ocean's 11 and hedonism. I'm a big fan of the movie franchise, but back then I was an even bigger fan of the latter. I was staying at the Bellagio Hotel with some colleagues, and we were celebrating a work incentive trip together. After checking in, my acquaintances and I headed out for a typical over-the-top lavish buffet dinner. I often use food as a crutch, and an all-you-can-eat buffet restaurant in Las Vegas was a great place to exercise those demons. Having already committed 3 of the deadly sins at dinner, gluttony, greed, and sloth, I decided to maraud the rest of the hotel in an attempt to tick off the rest of that diabolical list: pride, envy, lust, and wrath. I found an intimate cocktail bar nearby and plonked myself opposite the barman. "What will it be, sir?" he asked. "Dry martini, shaken, not stirred," I regurgitated back, using my very best Sean Connery impression. He looked back at me with a large, disingenuous smile, and I could hear his brain tabulate just how many times he had heard that line before. By his exasperated response, it must have been in the thousands. I differentiated myself by forcing an awkward joke on the now glazed-eyed barman. Sean Connery walks into a bar. He says, "I'd like a shingle shot." The bartender says, "That's a good idea, because if you've had the chicken pox, the virus is already in you." He didn't laugh, and the joke didn't help. My only saviour was the 35% tip I felt obliged to pay. Over the next 4 hours, I consumed enough gin to maim a small elephant. I was drunk, but lucid enough to know that I was far from done for the evening. I was ready to find that next crazy adventure. Leaving the bar, I headed to the main casino floor to observe the landscape. The place was a hive of activity, lights, and excitement. And even if you're not a gambler, it's a magnificent sight to behold. Thousands of poker machines alongside hundreds of tables dotted with gamblers of all races and creeds, all vying for that Las Vegas luck. Looking to my right, next to the blackjack table, I spied a fantastically presented trio, 1 man and 2 women. They looked like they knew how to have fun, so I beelined straight towards them and introduced myself. They seemed a little taken aback when I boldly approached them, but they soon realised I wasn't a threat and opened their arms, hearts, and minds to me. Marty, Molly, and Vanessa were newly arrived from London in an escape of their own way, with the death of Marty's father only days earlier. Marty was a flamboyantly gay and fantastic jewellery designer for British superstars like Kate Moss. Vanessa was a wealthy English socialite, and Molly an artist and erotic novelist former fashion editor of Harper's and Queen's, and after becoming a television personality, the first female banned by the BBC for swearing on TV. It didn't take a rocket surgeon to realise I was in the presence of some pretty amazing people who had lived some pretty amazing lives. They asked me what I did, and I made up some malarkey about being better than I was, and that I was a surfer. The closest thing I ever got to surfing was using Mr. Zog's sex wax to style my hair before it fell out at age 16, probably due to the wax, now I think about it. They were all stone cold sober and had been for years. They didn't mind my drinking around them, and we enjoyed gambling across a few different tables, laughing and joking, and generally enjoying each other's company. I distracted them from the bad news back home, and they distracted me from having to call it a night. We spoke about many things that evening, but like most drunken discussions, the topic of sex came up, and each of us revealed how recent our last conquest had been. As we went through our respective numbers, Molly, who was last, surprised everyone by admitting it had been a whole decade since she'd been with a man, although she did reveal that some of her former lovers included Louis Armstrong, John Mortimer, George Melly, Joe Thor, and Bo Diddley. "I'll break that dry spell for you, Molly," I interjected. "Oh, God, no," she responded sheepishly. "I couldn't possibly. Anyway, I'm much too old for you." "You're as old as the man you're touching," I joked. She laughed, and we headed to another section of the bar to take a better positioned view of the casino. I offered my services to Molly one more time and made sure she knew I was serious. Molly's eyes looked up and left, and her expression changed to one of pondering. She was thinking about it. "I wish someone would ask me for a fuck," Marty proclaimed. We all laughed, and Vanessa snorted her drink out of her nose. She was enjoying the toing and froing, but was staying well away from this discussion. I sidled up next to Molly and got within striking distance for a kiss on the lips. I pounced like a panther, but she modestly deflected her face away at the last second, and my lips landed on her cheek. My second attempt was a success, and I had landed a passionate kiss smack bang on her red cherry Dior painted lips, and the floodgates burst open. She kissed me back, and I could tell this had a dramatic effect and positive effect on her. I grabbed Molly by the hand, and we snuck off to the ambulance section of the men's toilet. The romance happened, and the deed was done without having to remove too much clothing, and we soon returned to Marty and Vanessa. Another notch on my belt, I thought to myself, before being startled back to reality when Molly asked me if I'd like to join them for breakfast. I was still very much intoxicated at that point, so I said, of course. I joined the trio for breakfast, and we discussed fondly what had happened. Molly had broken her 10-year sex hiatus, and I had helped her do it. Win-win, I thought. We exchanged contact details, and before they left to retire for the day, I kindly suggested to Molly that if she ever wrote another erotic novel, she use Laban as a character name. That would be cool, I thought to myself. I had a late morning flight to New York to catch, so I trudged my way back to the room and packed my things. After arriving in the Big Apple and sleeping off a powerful hangover, I awoke to the shame of doing something that, had I been sober, I wouldn't have done. I didn't tell... Molly was much older than me. To say I was ashamed was an understatement. I didn't tell a single soul what had happened. Another drunken event locked away in the forgotten memory banks of my brain. Laban's random lesson. Over my life, I have woken the next day to many regrettable situations with women. Not that the ladies involved were bad people, far from it. It's just that the rule should at least be this. If you would not sleep with someone when you are sober, you should never sleep with them not sober. However, try telling that to a horny drunk who uses sex as escapism. Chapter 12. It's getting warmed up here, folks. Welcome to Mollywood. Fast forward 3 years and I find myself back in Australia on a Thursday night drinking beers with the lads. And as the pints went down, so did the quality of the conversation. Somebody in the group proposed a controversial question to everybody. How old is the oldest woman you've been with? We laughed awkwardly and then quickly scanned each other to see who would start us off. Someone shared that he had pashed his boss's secretary, who was 56 at the time, and we all laughed heartily and cheered our drinks in appreciation. There were a few other half-hearted attempts, but nothing of any substance. So I felt it was my time to contribute. At this point, enough time had elapsed and enough beer had weakened my tight lips for me to feel comfortable sharing my story. "Gentlemen, I think I could beat that," I said apprehensively. "Go on then, Labes, what have you got for us?" they goaded. I paused briefly and then executed. I made love to a 73-year-old erotic novelist in a bathroom in Las Vegas. "What?" they yelled disbelievingly. "That's absolute bullshit, mate. You always tell us everything, and there's no way you could have kept that a secret this long." "I did, honestly, lads, no bullshit. Her name was Molly Parkin." "No, mate, you're talking absolute codswallop." Just forget it then, I relented. They dismissed my pleas and the topic quickly changed to something slightly more mundane. It was too unbelievable to them, but I was thankful for the brief reprieve. I say brief because what happened next was truly shocking. The next day arrived right on schedule, just like any other Friday morning, and I was in the office doing my thing when the phone started going bananas. Ding, ding, ding. The text messages started flying through. Then came the phone call from my mate from the night before. Before I could say anything, he yells, "Fuck me, Ditchburn. Check your email now." I hung up the phone and immediately jumped on my computer. The subject line of the first email read, "What the actual fuck?" I clicked the link and I opened a page on the Daily Mail, largely regarded as one of the biggest and certainly the most scandalous news sites in the UK. Good golly, Miss Molly. The flamboyant Molly Parkin, 75, one-time fashion editor, novelist and artist, reveals how an unlikely sexual encounter with a man 50 years her junior has inspired her to paint again. As I finished reading the sub-headline, the blood drained from my face. I started to feel weak in the knees. I scanned the article and my breath quickened. There it was, Laban, in black and white, in a major newspaper, my name plastered all over the page. Laban. It's an unusual name. In fact, I've never even met another Laban before. You'll recall the moment at breakfast when I politely requested that my name be used should she ever write again? Well, now I had my wish. Well, nearly. My heart started beating faster than a John Bonham drum solo. My phone rang again, startling me. Jesus H. Christ, this is everywhere, bro. Check your inbox. Ping, another email came through. This time with a link to Wales Online, the huge UK tabloid newspaper. Again, I clicked on the link. Molly reveals hot affair in Las Vegas, screamed the headline. Author and artist Molly Parkin has revealed how a mystical encounter with a young Australian man in Las Vegas reinvigorated her lust for life. I gasped out loud and I could feel my brain politely ask me what to do. Was it fight or flight? Another email, this time from express.co.uk, another major tabloid read all across the UK. Bold Molly beds toy boy surfer, the headline declared. You'll also recall the barefaced lie about being a surfer. Yeah, well, this is why we tell the truth, people. The enormity of the situation caused my head to spin. One simple Boolean search of Molly Parkin and Laban triggered a huge bonanza of headlines from right across the globe. Laban was a mysterious gentleman. Meanwhile, I was unanimously declared the winner of the Who Had Been With the Oldest Woman competition, and we could all go on with our lives. Or so I thought. My formerly sceptical friends now had the scoop on what had been described as the greatest story ever told, and it didn't take long for the gossip grapevine to swing into action. Within days, people I'd never met were asking me if what they'd heard was true. I must admit, I felt very uncomfortable admitting this to people, especially while sober. I mean, having a one-night stand was one thing, but having a one-night stand with someone 50 years older? After all the madness calmed down, I took the time to actually read what had been written about Molly and me. It turned out that when I met Molly in 2005, her life was at a low point considering her previously extravagant existence. Basically bankrupt and relying on others to survive. That tryst in a Las Vegas bathroom had reinvigorated Molly and sparked a new lust for life, creating a catalyst for change. She resumed painting and writing, even tried her hand at being a DJ in clubs across London with her daughter and granddaughter. Not bad for 70-odd years old. Another few years passed by, and after pressure from some friends, I decided to get in contact with Molly. I dug through my old papers and found the Rip Casino Keno card on which Molly had written her details. Even her handwriting was flamboyant and eccentric. I timed the call to be a decent hour London time, and rang the number. "Hello, this is Moll," she answered. "Hi, Molly, this is Laban. Remember me?" The phone went silent for a few seconds, and then she burst into voice. "Laban, how lovely to hear from you." We spoke for nearly an hour, and Molly was thrilled to share with me the wonderful progress she had made since we last saw each other. Her career as a prolific painter had taken off again, and she was selling her artwork for tens of thousands of pounds in galleries across the UK and Europe. She was most proud of her piece, Las Vegas Lay, a rendition of our encounter together. She even nailed my rather muscular thighs and proud buttocks. It hangs to this day in a private art gallery in Chelsea in London. And not long after contact was made, I was approached by the BBC in England. They were producing a documentary on Molly's colourful life, and they wanted to hear my side of the Las Vegas story. I politely declined, as the gravity of my actions still shrouded me in shame. Molly had also just finished her autobiography, Welcome to Mollywood, where she recounted her fascinating life from day one, then decided to then dedicate a whole chapter to her Las Vegas experience with Laban, the blonde surfer. With Molly's permission, and for your entertainment, I've included verbatim an extract from her autobiography. You may recall Molly is an award-winning erotic novelist, so I'll let you, dear reader, dear listener, decide what is fact and what is fiction. You ready for this? He skillfully slid one leg out of my underwear after freeing it from my satin trousers, mercifully on an elastic waistband which stretched for the onslaught, leaving the other half of my lumbar region still fully clothed. At 73, almost 74, I had never been so swiftly or so seductively semi-undressed, ever, not ever. And this endeared me now to this total stranger, so that to facilitate easier entry, I planted my left foot atop the lavatory seat to cover down, such that with every sensual lunge, an automatic response like the pulling of a chain to expel the contents of the lavabo occurred, as loud as a symphony concert. We whooped in unison, roaring together, brimming with this added humour, unexpectedly enhancing the occasion, bent double, but still attached by our genitals. This boy was a sublime lover. The orgasmic rapture was speeded up by the sounds of the cleaner approaching, clanging an enamel bucket and thrusting his mop under the door when it failed to open. We could barely contain our laughter, but contain it we did. Mesmerised by the action to and fro of the mop, we both climaxed together in silence. The atmosphere was electrifying. The cleaner retreated, banging the exit door behind him. My lover kept coming. I had forgotten just how much spunk young men produce. Had I still been fertile, I would have conceived sextuplets or more from that single insertion. It gives me a profound satisfaction to declare that this has been one of the more invigorating of my many sexual encounters, one I still hold dear to my heart, which to this very day, writing this now, still brings a wide smile to my face, proving indeed to be my sexual swan song. Laban's Random Lessons. Well, you're probably wondering what obscure lesson is to come from this experience. The honest reason I share this story with you is because it's too good not to share. It's also a great example of what happens when you speak the truth. Well, eventually at least. We all do and say things that are embarrassing, and anyone who doesn't is either telling fibs or not really pushing the boundaries of living. When we share these stories with people who love and respect us, it distributes the burden of knowledge and takes the sting out of storing in our complicated heads where it ruminates amongst shame and anxiety. Why do you think the Catholic confession booth is so popular? So, Molly and I are still friends on Facebook. She's in her 90s now. She's still kicking. She's lost, most of her marbles, without being disrespectful. She's, her cognitive functions dissipated a lot, but for quite a few years there, she's very switched on. We've had a few conversations on the phone, and it's always a lot of fun. She's lived an extraordinary life, and one of my favourite things about this whole experience, during the day, Molly was quite promiscuous, and she talks about that in her book, Welcome to Mollywood. But she turned down Frank Sinatra. And I wouldn't say there'd be many guys in the world that hooked up with someone who turned down Frank Sinatra. So thanks, Blue Eyes, up in heaven, whatever you're doing. Bit of a crass comparison, but it's a bit of fun to think about. And my darling wife, Anna, thinks the story is hilarious. And really, like I mentioned at the end of the chapter, like we really do silly things, particularly when we're younger and particularly under the influence. And should we allow it to let us affect us in ways that we are in a state of shame the whole time? I disagree with that. This story has honestly brought so much joy to so many people long before the book came out, because no one got hurt. It reinvigorated her life, and I think it's inspiring in its own way, and I carried the shame of that for such a long time, unnecessarily. Would I do it again? No. But, would you give me the option to go back and change anything? Why, of course I wouldn't. So that's really my lesson. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll look forward to the next chapter. And for those that have missed the start of this, you can catch all of these on my YouTube channel with the podcast Become Your Own Superhero, which is available on all podcast platforms, but these lives are only available on YouTube. And if you're not having a great day, I'd encourage you to do so. And if you are, well, keep up the good work, would you?